Hi, Jack. I wanted to leave you some feedback on your week one writing assignment. First off, your heading looks pretty good, pretty professional. It looks like you forgot your header up here in the right hand corner. So remember that you also need to include your last name and your page number when you format papers in MLA. Remember, there's a tutorial on how to format your papers in MLA located in the resources folder in Blackboard. So if you need directions on how to create a header, it's located there for you. It looks like something happened with your formatting, right? You notice, or sorry, you probably noticed that your paragraphs are all shifted over. You actually want them aligned with your header. Sorry, excuse me, with your heading. So this should all be pulled over this way. I'm not quite sure what happened, but basically you want 1 inch margins on either side and then a half-inch margin at the top. So let's talk about the content in your summary. As a whole, I think that this is working well. I like the fact that you're bringing up that not only is the story, kind of grappling with the immorality of capital punishment, but it's also kind of poking at how easy it is for humans to go along with immoral acts if it is assumed to be okay by an authority, right? So you seem to be talking about it in terms of work, and you're absolutely right. I think that that would be a really interesting way to talk about this text because there's multiple layers in the story. Like, so you could essentially write about it just being about how like an anti-capital punishment stance. You could also write about what you seem to be suggesting here, that yeah, it's that, but it's also about how like I said before, how easy it is to just kind of go along with things that we don't agree with when um, authority figures or systems tell us that it's okay, right? I think that that would be a really interesting way to talk about this. And it really looks like you are kind of setting up the key ideas that would allow you to do this. You provide evidence for the third key point, but I think that you could technically do the same with these two key ideas here, right? So if you choose to write about Orwell, for essay one, I might return to this paragraph because I think that you have something here. Let's talk about your actual summary. So remember, you want to always format the titles of works in MLA. Short stories should be in quotation marks like you've done here. Make sure you do the same in the actual summary. Um, you want to try to avoid the use of direct quotations right here when you summarize. Remember what you're doing in summary. You are capturing the author's main point in your own words. So if you're using direct quotations, you're not doing that, right? You're not summarizing. This is an example of something that you could probably use to support these key ideas down here, which are your own key points, right, on the essay. So instead, I think that this is a good point to end on in the summary. I feel like what you're missing, and I think that your opening line is pretty good. I feel like what you're missing in here and what should really replace all this is more clearly establishing both the setting and who the narrator is. Because, you bring up the narrator, but you don't tell us who he is. And who the narrator is something that's really important to this idea here, right? So if the reader doesn't know that the narrator is a prison guard who has to watch prisoners be executed every day, right? And he's been at this job for a while, and when the story takes place, he recognizes for the very first time that actually what they're doing is wrong and immoral. The fact that he is who he is and the story takes place where it does is really pivotal to this idea here, right? Right? Because and note that in your summary, those ideas aren't there. So for the reader to really understand about how the human mind copes, they need to know who's telling the story and where the story is taking place. So I think that those ideas would be far more effective than this direct quotation in here. And as I said before, you don't want to put direct quotations in summaries anyway. So I said that I really like this, and I think that these could be key ideas that you could expand upon in a final essay. I do want to leave you with one final point, though. You start talking at the very end, you start talking about colonialism, but you do so only briefly. That's going to fall completely flat on the reader if you don't go into this idea in more depth. So remember when I said that the story really has layers? You could simply talk about this story in terms of being anti-capital punishment. You could write about it in terms of how people are conditioned to do immoral acts or to do things that they don't agree with through socialization and through creeds by authority figures. And then finally, you could also talk about it in terms of how harmful and immoral British colonialism was as well, right? Those are 3 different layers there. You could still talk about this essay without talking about colonialism, right? You could. I'm not saying that you should do this. What I'm saying is if you are bringing up colonialism, it needs far more background information and detail and explanation than just this tiny little prepositional phrase. So my point is this: if you want to include it, you need to explore it in more depth. If you really don't want to go there and you'd rather focus on this idea, I wouldn't talk much about it then, right? And like I said, there's layers here. So it's just how many layers do you want to dig into? I think this could give you enough to work with for Essay 1. It's kind of up to you. So just some things here and there to keep in mind, but overall, I really enjoyed reading your submission, and I think you got some good original ideas here that I'd like to see you work out in more depth.